I was in Charlottesville all weekend for the Republican Advance. Yeah, it's the retreat, but they don't want to call it a retreat, so they call it the Advance. But it's all the activists from across the state of Virginia who gathered together to rehash what happened in the last election cycle and get ready for the next election cycle. So Winsome Sears, the current lieutenant governor, who appears likely to be the Republican nominee for governor, was there. Jason Miyares was there. A lot of other folks who have run for office or contemplating running for office, including a couple of folks who were looking at running for lieutenant governor of Virginia next year. So it's an interesting weekend of conversation. And one of the things that came up several times was the University of Virginia, because the hotel where we were staying was adjacent to the law school at UVA and just a short walk from the rotunda designed by Thomas Jefferson. You see it on all the postcards. Whenever you see a Virginia postcard, this is one of the iconic views that's associated with Virginia. And UVA of late, I don't want to say it's gotten a black eye, but there's certainly been a lot of questionable things that have been happening at UVA, which making some people, including those at the Jefferson Council, question whether UVA has lost its way as a great institution with the original intent of its founder, the president, Thomas Jefferson. Jim Bacon from baconsrebellion.com is working with the Jefferson Council to try to restore some of the grounding principles at UVA. And Jim, I appreciate you joining us. I actually saw Bert Ellis, who's on the board at UVA at one point. I didn't get to really talk to him much, but what's the deal? They had a board meeting and he finally decided to let him have it?
Good morning, John. That's absolutely right. Bert has been on the board for, I guess, close to 2.5 years now, and he has been kind of handcuffed. I mean, I think the governor has urged him to, of course, he was very controversial. His appointment was very controversial, accused of being a racist and a homophobe and all sorts of awful things. And so, he was advised to kind of like play nice with others and just wait until we got a majority on the board, and then the Youngkin appointees could start making things happen. Well, the Youngkin appointees have been a majority on the board for half a year now, and this will be their second full board meeting in which they were had this majority. The rector is still a Northam holdover, but and so the Youngkin people can't control the agenda, but they could make things happen and shake things up if they want to. But there's been no sign of it, and I think Bert finally just got he got tired of this. I mean, he kind of went out there all by himself. I mean, he got no one kind of going along with him, but he said, look, the board was facing decisions to advance some $500 million worth of construction projects on new buildings, and he said, I'm going to vote against all these. I'm going to vote against any spending increase at UVA until someone comes back with a budget that shows significant spending cuts. And he was out there by himself, and he kind of announced this, and no one backed him up, and not even any of the other members, the Youngkin appointees. Even the guys, disappointingly, even the guys who kind of like behind the scenes, kind of like agree with Bert, they didn't go along. They kind of left them twisting in the wind a little bit. But I will say this, that the board did begin acting a little bit more assertive on budget issues. They didn't overturn anything. They didn't vote anything down, but they kind of signaled with their questions and their words that they're going to be taking a closer look at the budget. So the biggest issue is what's called the Strategic Investment Fund, which is $1 billion plus fund at UVA, which has cobbled together all these different reserve funds and little small things, which collect very little interest in their bank accounts, and they kind of pool them together and they get a higher rate of return. And so this thing generates, $40, $50 million a year, something like that, $60 million a year. that UVA can spend any way it wants. And it was once characterized as a slush fund. And everybody said, "Oh, no, it's not a slush fund. We've got all these rules and guidelines and things attached to it." And I don't think there's any evidence that it's been spent abusively or anything like that. But it does all advance President Jim Ryan's priorities. And the board members, there was no vote, but a number of them said, "Look, we're going to take a closer look at this. We're going to paying a lot more attention to this, and we want to take." It used to be that the board didn't. It originally, when it was set up, the board had oversight, and then a previous board said, "Oh, well, there's so much detail here. We'll just delegate it to the administration. We won't pay any attention to it." Now the board wants to have oversight again. So that was like a small move to kind of reestablish control over some of the spending. There were some other interesting things going on. The board was demanding more advance notice on passing the budget. They didn't want to be presented with a fait accompli in June at the end of the fiscal year when it was too late to make any adjustments. They wanted to see the budget earlier. And they also signaled they were going to take a closer look at debt. Their interest rate environment is changing. UVA has done a great job at managing its debt, getting really low interest rates. But when it is talking about spending $500 million on 3 new construction projects, you can't count on getting the same low interest rates that you have been getting in the past. And the board wants to be more involved in looking at that. So, in summary, it's like they're saying, we want to take a closer look. We don't disagree with anything. We're not asking you to come back like Bert Ellis and cut the budget, but at least we're going to take a closer look. So that's kind of where we are. It's a minimal sign of progress, but at least it's a sign of progress.
Does UVA need $500 million worth of new buildings?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. One of the projects would be a significant new dormitory complex, and the goal is to make it mandatory. The long-term goal is make it mandatory for all first and second-year students to live in university dorms. As you may know, John, what happens now is first-year students all live in dorms. Maybe half the second-year students do, but there's not enough dormitory room for everybody, so they all live out in the community. And the students are subject to market rates, which have been going up a lot. And so this, in theory, is a way of maybe bringing that situation under control a little bit, creating a little bit more supply, giving them some options they didn't have before. But there's a question about whether that's really needed or not. Why not just let the private sector? If you need more housing for students, let the private sector build it, and which they would be very happy to do. Another building project is a big garage, and that's to serve this newly developed area along Ivy Road, which is where all the expanded facilities and all the new stuff is going. So people got to drive in and have somewhere to park, so they're going to build a garage.
Yeah.
But the most controversial one is this new art center where they would combine a bunch of things, music and performing arts and some art galleries and things like that, and at a cost of some $300 million. And they expect to get $200 million of this from the Commonwealth of Virginia. So, I think a lot of other people, taxpayers generally around the state of Virginia, have a stake in this, and it is a legitimate question to ask: does Charlottesville really need a $300 million performing arts center? So that's a good question.
Paid for by taxpayers. That's the problem. And it just strikes me these numbers are very huge for an institution like this that only a limited number of Virginians actually get to interact with, that's got a lot of resources, and there's so many other groups that don't have access to this kind of cash. The other thing that strikes me about what you're telling me, Jim, is that, and I've said this for the last 2 years, I think the administration of UVA is looking at the calendar, and they're saying Glenn Youngkin's going to be gone in 12 months, 13 months now. He will no longer be governor. And it's a 50-50 shot that we'll have a Democrat that we agree with in the governor's mansion. So we're just going to drag our feet, and we're going to pretend like we actually are listening to you, but we're not going to do a damn thing you want. And then we'll just hope that we wind up with a Democrat who will allow us to lurch back to the left again, and no real change will have been accomplished. That's got to be driving Bert really mad.
Yeah, John, you're absolutely right. The clock is ticking, and I think that's one of the things that Bert is really worried about. And I think some of the other board members are too. Why they can't move more aggressively is beyond me. But, President Ryan's strategy is to run out the clock and avoid any substantive changes the way business is done at UVA. That's absolutely it. And so now it's funny. It's like so UVA's board started out totally dominated by Democrats until Youngkin could appoint like 4 or 5 each year until by the end of his term he'll appointed everybody on the board, and then the new governor will roll in, and if it's Abigail Spanberger, she will have kind of the same problem in reverse, as she'll be the governor, and all the board members will have been appointed by Youngkin. The difference is that Youngkin played nice the whole entire time. Youngkin didn't make waves. He didn't throw his weight around. There's no knowing what Spanberger will do. I mean, we may remember.
Well, Democrats seem to not have a problem with being aggressive, you know.
Well, yeah, everybody remember what Ralph Northam did at Virginia Military Institute? I mean, he forced General P out and brought in his new superintendent, and a couple of board members resigned. And, so, I mean, that same kind of scenario could perfectly well play out. And if the board isn't more aggressive and if it doesn't take charge, that could very well happen. It could be a total opportunity squandered. We don't know, of course. Right. I mean, we're just worrying about possibilities, but, who knows?
Jim Bacon, check out his latest posts at baconsrebellion.com, and I always appreciate the inside scoop, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
8:47. We're back with more in a moment on this Monday morning on News Radio WRVA.